friends, it's Kayla Moran and welcome back to the Let's Get Candid podcast. How's everybody doing today? Happy Thursday, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever day or time you're listening. I hope you all are having a beautiful start to your 2023. I can't believe we are already in the new year and it's January and it's time for a fresh start. But I've said this before, but I don't really like to subscribe to resolutions. I just don't think it's fair. I just don't think they are good for anyone because they set you up to fail. They put so much unnecessary pressure. So I like to set intentions for the year instead. And I have shared in a couple of episodes that I kind of set them in steps. I share a list of intentions for the year. I create on the notes app on my phone. You could write this out in your planner or however you want to do it. I create a list of goals for myself and I separate it into micro goals and big picture goals. And then I separate it also by category. So personal life, friendships, relationships, business, different categories, whatever you want them to be. And then I make a manifestation list of things I want to manifest in that year. And then I start kind of compiling all of that and creating a word for myself, setting a word for myself for the year that is going to be the intention of the year. And for me this year, that word is presence, and it was part of my words for last year as well. But presence, because I've truly felt in the last couple of months that I'm coming into my own. And I shared a couple of weeks ago my experience with developing an abundance mindset. And this week I want to talk about forgiveness because I think that is truly the key to unlocking that transformation, and that abundance mindset is not just gratitude, but also not only being grateful for all the opportunities to grow and learn and evolve, but also being grateful for your past self and for all that they did to get you to where you are today, and forgiving yourself for anything that you feel wasn't the way that you wanted to show up in the world, because we're always learning and growing and evolving, and we're not always going to get it right, and we're going to make mistakes, but that doesn't mean that they are failures. And I think it's really cool when you get to say, you know what, I'm proud of you and I love you and I forgive you for whatever it is, and also forgiving the people around you that didn't show up in your life the way that you hoped that they would or that you wanted them to. And this is the one that I'm really working on still, forgiving people in my life that I wanted them to be a certain way, but they're not capable or they're not willing to be. And I just need to accept that and keep moving forward with my life, because the only person that's hurting is me if I keep hoping for them to be something that they're not, or that they're not willing to give me. And I think the easiest way to forgive yourself is to just speak to yourself kindly and literally hug yourself at night and say, I forgive you for whatever it is. Or writing it down in your journal, or looking in your mirror and saying, I forgive you. And catching yourself when you are talking negatively of yourself, or limiting yourself, or saying you're not good enough, or this or that, or you catch yourself thinking it, stop and say, nope, I forgive you for saying that. That is not true. And I think it's a practice. It's rewiring your brain and the way you speak to yourself, because we are the only person that we've got, and we hear ourselves more than anybody else. And, your thoughts, you're internalizing all of that. And I think just being conscious of it a little bit more and forgiving yourself when you catch yourself doing those things, and then forgiving the people around you for not being what you wanted them to be, takes you so far. And then, of course, you start practicing gratitude and you work your way towards an abundance mindset like I talked about. But there's just so much power in forgiveness and acceptance, and just accepting that you didn't have it all figured out, and that's okay, and you're not supposed to, and that this year is a new year and there's a blank slate It's a new chapter in a book. So many days to come, full of opportunities and experiences and people that are going to bring something of value to your life and teach you something. And let go of the expectations that you're supposed to be somewhere because it's this year now, and because you're this old, or you're this career, or whatever it is. Don't put those pressures on yourself. And I think if we all try to forgive ourselves for not being where we wanted to be right now, and just accepting that we are on our own timeline, we are on our own path, and we don't know what's out there. We don't know what's to come, but we're trusting that it's the right thing for us, because what is meant for us will come. And learning to forgive our younger self and listen to her if you're a girl, or to him, or to whoever. Talk to your inner child and, tell her that, I'm going to say her because I'm a female, she, her pronouns, but, tell her, like, I'm proud of you and I'm happy for you. And look at all the things that you're going to accomplish. Look at all the things that you have accomplished. And forgive yourself for all the things that you think you should have accomplished that you didn't, because there's no shoulds here. There's no have-tos. You get to. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think this is the perfect intro for this week's episode, because I have the girls of Because We Went to Therapy on, Emily, who is a therapist, and Ashley, who is a fitness instructor. And they talk about mental health and wellness on their show. I think it's really cool to see two girls that are around my age showing up for themselves in the best way and doing the work and sharing it, because they have their own podcast, Because We Went to Therapy, and I was a guest on their show, so I'll link it down below for you guys for you to check out. And we dive into my experience with therapy and a whole lot more. But I think there's just so much good stuff in this episode for you guys, and I look forward to the feedback and having them be a part of the Let's Get Candid community, because there's so much greatness to be done. And I think, like I said, forgiveness and gratitude and just healing your inner child and showing up in the best way for yourself is the key to, honestly, everything. I think it's just a really good time to be having these conversations and to be tapping into our wellness and our mental health and setting up new habits and intentions for ourselves in the new year. I think it's really cool to start a new year with a clean slate, but not like we're not throwing away last year and the years before that. People say clean slate, fresh start, letting go of the bad. You wash away the bad, but no, don't wash it away. Sit with it, acknowledge it. Take what you need to take from it. Take in those lessons, and then forgive yourself for thinking that you need to do more than what you did in the last year, because you're exactly where you're meant to be right now. And I think once you start forgiving yourself, it becomes a little bit easier to speak kindlier to yourself and to practice gratitude, like I said. And, when you start forgiving yourself, you start forgiving others around you when they make mistakes because they didn't show up the way that you wanted to. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. I keep saying that, and I keep hearing myself say that, and it's just, that's where I'm at. And that's something that I really want to work on this year. And I'm considering going back to therapy. And I talk a lot about my experience with therapy in this episode, but, I took a break after the bar exam, or like right before the bar exam. I stopped going, so it's been about 6 months, and I think it was really good for me to take that break. And I've been on a really big transformational journey in these last 6 months, not having gone to therapy. But I think I might go back, at least not right now, but soon, because I really do want to work on forgiving others, because it just allows you to be more at peace and I find myself, when there's no drama going on in my life or shenanigans, I like try to create it in my head because I want, to fight. I want that defense mechanism to come back because it's what I'm comfortable. And I want to let go of that and forgive myself for always trying to cause drama and start drama within myself. I don't do it with outside. Like, I don't create drama intentionally for people, but I create drama in my own life because, it feels safe, the chaos. And I want to forgive myself for that. And I want to, tell myself that you don't need to do that because when things are going really well, that's a good thing. That means that you've grown and evolved and you're coming into your own and you don't need chaos anymore. Like you're in a good place. Enjoy it. And I want to forgive myself for that, and I want to forgive myself for the people that I keep kind of bringing into the drama that I create in my head, because that's probably hurting them subconsciously or on some weird universal level, to constantly be wishing them badly or thinking of them the way that I am in my head. So that's something that I want to work on this year, and just being kinder to myself. But in order to do that, I need to forgive myself and forgive others. And I wanted to share that with you guys. And I know this intro's getting a little long again. I love to ramble, but it's really cool to see how far I've come and to be really proud of my growth and recognize there's still so much more to do. And I'm really excited for this new year of doing that with you guys every single week on the podcast and sharing these intros, and just you guys getting to see me evolve alongside you guys, and your messages every week when something resonates really does mean the absolute world. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode and you enjoy the girls of Because We Went to Therapy, because I think there's so much great value here. And if you're looking for a new therapist, check them out, check out their resources, and fingers crossed to in the new year getting some podcast sponsorships. And I would love to have a sponsor that is a mental health provider, because that would be not only full circle, but also a testament to the power of podcasts and the power of doing the work. And I hope you guys enjoy, and I will see you guys all when I get back from Ecuador next week. And actually, no, I will still be in Ecuador in next week's episode, but in 2 weeks from this episode, I will be back in real time. But I hope you guys enjoyed these pre-recorded episodes. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening. It really does mean the world to me to get all your support, your feedback, your comments, your messages. When you guys screenshot and tag us on stories, it really does light up my day. So thank you guys so much. Please leave a rating and review. Please subscribe to the show, share with a friend. And I am so grateful to have you guys here for another year of Let's Get Candid. And I will talk to you guys all next week. Meet Emily and Ashley. So, Emily, Ashley, what's something that people wouldn't know about you just from following you? And you can do this individually or from like the Because We Went to Therapy perspective, however you want to do it.
So Emma can go first.
Okay.
So I actually deleted my social media at the beginning of 2021, and originally I was only going to do it for a month, like the month of January, because I was like, I spend way too much time on social media. I didn't even post that much, honestly, but like I was just straight up addicted. And I was using it as a coping mechanism for my anxiety, honestly, just like constantly distracting myself. So I feel like since then, I've totally changed my life, like with therapy, my profession, the state I live in, everything. So I feel like if you were to look at my social media as it was like when I left it at the end of 2020, you would have no idea that I'm a fitness instructor now. That's like my profession. That's what I do, because I was not fit in any way, shape, or form. I didn't work out. I didn't belong to a gym. The only exercise I did was walking, which is totally fine. Like, that's just where I was in life. But yeah, it's so interesting for me talking to people now, or friends that I haven't seen in a little while that I've reconnected with. And they're like, oh, yeah, I haven't seen you on Instagram or whatever. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a cycle instructor now." And they're like, "Hold up, what?" Like, I've known you for 15 years. I had no idea you were interested in that. So, yeah, that's probably something people wouldn't know about me from just glancing at my social media.
That's a good one.
I think for me, I mean, like, my close friends know this, and I mentioned it once on the podcast, I think, but haven't done a full episode on it yet, but I've been in eating disorder recovery for about 3 years now. I went to treatment in 2019 to 2020, but yeah, I've been in recovery ever since.
That's awesome. Congrats. And yeah, I want
Thanks.
to touch on that a little bit. Just each of your stories. But first, where did Because We Went to Therapy come about? Why did you guys start a podcast, and why mental health and therapy and everything that you guys talk about? And I'm so glad you do. I think it's super important that more people are talking about it. Yeah, where did it all come from?
I so actually we started bouncing the idea off each other probably like 6 or 8 months ago. We've been recording for about 2 months now since the beginning of 2022. But Emily is a therapist. She lives in Arizona. We went to college together at the University of Illinois, and I was working a corporate job. I have a business degree, but I've always been really passionate about mental health and interested in like psychology and human behavior. So Emily and I would always be texting about like pop culture, mental health stuff that was going on and stuff we would see. And I don't even know who brought it up first, Em. I don't know if you remember, but we were like, we should have a podcast. And I
I think
think
it
we
was
just
you.
started joking. Yeah, because it seems like, yeah, everybody has a podcast. So we were just kind of joking. And then eventually at the beginning of 2022, we kept talking about it. And we don't see each other in person all that often since I live in Wisconsin, she's in Arizona. And eventually we're like, "Screw it, like, let's just do it. Let's just" it was really scary. We were so scared when we started recording it, but we're like, "This is important."
Yeah,
That's such a
yeah,
good buddy to have. And just start, like you said, just start it. Like, who cares? Just go for it. And it's only been 2 months, but like I can tell you guys like really love it. And it is so important that you guys are doing this. So I'm glad you guys started.
we love
Mhm.
it, and I think for as a therapist, like, I do one-on-one therapy, which obviously is great, but I also wanted to talk more about it just generally, right? And so to have a podcast where we can just talk about like whatever we want, right? And like whatever we feel is important, and like getting to interview really awesome people, just having a different way to talk about mental health than just, one-on-one with my client. I thought that was something I really wanted to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, I don't know if you guys feel this way, especially you, Emily, but for me, being on the podcast mic, whether it's with a guest or a solo episode, it's like therapy. It's another way of me, like stream of consciousness, like kind of journaling audibly, like getting my thoughts out. And I love getting to meet people and connect with people and talk to people that, like, yeah, like you said, you guys don't see each other that often. You live in two different states. I'm in a third state, and like, but we don't
Yeah.
be together to connect. And I think that's the beauty of social media, and I think the podcast medium as a whole. And that's why I love it so much, because it's a way to connect with people without having to be in the same room, but like it feels like you are. And so I love, and I think super important that you mentioned that too. Like, one-on-one therapy is great, but like not everyone can afford it or wants to go to therapy. And I think everyone should at some point in their life at least once go to therapy and give it a real shot. But if you're not ready to yet or unable, or you're taking a therapy break, having a podcast like this where you can still go through the process and work through things, whether, but it's not your own experience being talked about, it's someone else's. It's still therapy for you, even listening. So yeah, Ashley, can you talk a little bit about leaving corporate America and deciding to become a fitness instructor, and how that kind of came about? And because you said like people are like shocked now that you would,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So in college, I was an agricultural economics major. It's just basically like food business. And I essentially had like no idea what I wanted to do in college. I grew up in a really small farm town. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do food business just because like I honestly hadn't really found my personal interests yet. And I was always just like, I need to graduate, work at a really big company, make a lot of money and just like that's how I'll be successful. That's how I define success in my mind because that's how I always saw it like in pop culture. Like the rich people are who's successful. And that's always what I saw just with like in the adults around me. And our business school at University of Illinois was really competitive. It was like one of the best in the country. So all these people are wanting to go, to like the big four accounting firms and things like that. So as soon as I graduated, I worked at Union Pacific in Omaha, Nebraska, and I worked in a logistics type role. And it was technically an 8 to 5 job, salaried, but I was working like 60 hours a week. I was forced to work holidays. I never saw my family because I'm from Illinois originally, and I wasn't able to go home for the holidays. I was stuck in Omaha, and it was so stressful. Like, we would be talking to customers that would just be so, so rude to us. And everyone was constantly essentially grinding, like trying to work their way up and get that bigger bonus. And we were all like ranked against each other. I mean, they would literally throw up stats on like the shared TV
I
screen
remember
every
this
morning.
in law school.
Yeah, like showing our metrics of like this is how many like tasks that person finished yesterday. So it was just very competitive. And I saw people getting burnt out all the time and having all these health issues. And at the time, I wasn't in therapy, but I desperately needed it. I was just so burnt out. I was crying all the time. I would cry on my lunch break. I would cry in the bathroom. I would cry at my desk. Like I was just so anxious all the time. I never wanted to go to work. And on the weekends, and at night, I was just dead because I was so, so just like utterly emotionally and physically exhausted. I wasn't taking care of myself at all in terms of working out, self care, eating. I was literally like in survival mode. So I actually ended up getting to the point where I just quit and I moved home with my parents after like 18 months there, I believe. And I moved back to the small town in Illinois. Had no idea what I wanted to do. I was like so ashamed and so, so embarrassed. Like I didn't want to tell anybody. All my close friends knew, but I never wanted to hang out with anybody or meet new people. Because, the first thing that happens when you meet somebody is they say, "What do you do?" And it's like, I'm on a break. Like I worked for a couple years. Now I'm kind of in a gap year. And I kept applying and interviewing for all these jobs and I was offered some, but I was like, I'm going to be miserable. It's just like the same shit with a different title. And basically, I just like fell into a really bad depression. My mental health was shit. My physical health was really bad. We kind of talked about like the mind body connection, Kayla. Like when your mind is not right, your body starts to feel it too with like aches and pains, and your immune system can get compromised and all these different things. So I was at home for about a year. I started going to see a therapist there and just kind of figuring out like what do I want to do? Where do I want to be? Because I know this is not it. And eventually my boyfriend moved to Milwaukee at the beginning of 2020. So I didn't have a job yet and I was basically like, screw it, like I'm just going to move up there too and I'll figure it out as I go. And of course, like that's when COVID happened. Like I moved in March of 2020 and that like a week later everything shut down. And I actually did get a job at a food company, like a snack nut company in Milwaukee. And it originally was just supposed to be a temp job. Like I was just covering for somebody doing logistics that was on maternity leave. And they ended up hiring me full time. And I was there for about 2 years. And it was just not fulfilling to me at all. I mean, it was a paycheck, but I was constantly asking for more. There was like no professional development. I was just like bored to tears and I was tired of commuting 25 minutes each way. And I started going to therapy up here and like my depression just like kept coming back in waves. So I was going to like intensive therapy twice a week, just trying to figure out like, is it me? Is it my job? Is it corporate America? Like, what the heck is going on here? And eventually, I promise this is all connected, but I couldn't figure out like
Keep
what
going.
exactly it was in therapy. And I did uncover like I was working like with trauma therapy and all these different things, but eventually my therapist was like, maybe you just need to be on an antidepressant. Like maybe you should try working with your GP and just seeing like if it's just a chemical imbalance. Like we can do so much work in here through talk therapy, but maybe you just need a little something extra and that's okay. So I actually started on Prozac not that long after that. And since I started Prozac, I had so much more motivation. I was just feeling so much better after a couple months. And one of my goals, like every New Year's resolution, I was like, I'm going to get fit. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to lose some weight. Like, I'm going to finally feel good about my body. And so at the beginning of 2021, gyms were starting to open back up after quarantine. I got a gym membership with my boyfriend. We started going and taking all these different classes that they offered. And I met one of my good friends, Annabelle, there, and she was a cycle instructor and a trainer. And after taking her classes for a couple months, she was like, you would be a really good cycle instructor. Like, you are pretty skilled at it. And I was really, I was a dancer all growing up. So I have like that rhythmic background and movement. And she was like, if you want to do it, like, I'll train you, I'll help you. And literally, like 2 days before, I wrote down one of my goals was to become a fitness instructor. And she just happened to mention something to me right after that. And I was like,
It
this
worked.
is perfect. Yeah, like I manifested this. And she trained me, and I became um, licensed and certified to be a group fitness instructor. And eventually, after a couple months of doing that, and like my regular 8 to 5 job was just going nowhere, I just quit. And I'm just focusing on, the fitness role full time. And I'm also getting certified to teach bar classes as well. And I'm going back to school online at the University of Pennsylvania for an applied psychology program certification to kind of help out like with the podcast as well. Because once I quit my job is when we were able to start the podcast because I had all this extra time to help like dedicate to it. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I never would have thought like 2 years ago, if you would have told me I would have worked at a gym, I would have been like, yeah, right. Like I can't even walk on a treadmill. Like I hate cardio.
It's you're like you said, like you stopped to say, like, I promise this is all connected. And I was like, no, keep going, because it's funny. People are like, they look at my resume and they look at all the things that I'm doing. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you're a lawyer, but you're on social media and you're this and you're this. And it's like, when they all, like, when you are passionate about every single one, or it serves a bigger purpose in your life, there's a common line, like a common thread, that like it connects the dots, even if it doesn't seem.
Mhm.
And life is not linear. Like, this is a perfect example. Life is not linear. It's not meant to be. Because if it is, it's boring. You're just going on a predetermined path, and you're not doing the things that really make you happy, that you really want to do. So I think it's actually really great that, you know, that you went through all those ups and downs, because it led you to where you are today. And I want to talk a little bit about, going back to school for the applied psychology degree in a little bit, but I think it's really important that you said that, even just like as a almost a backhanded compliment to yourself, because it's like, no, like it's okay that it doesn't seem like it's all connected, because that's the beauty of life. It's not all supposed to be connected, but if it's meant to work out, it will. So
Mhm.
I love that. I think it's a great story too, that just, it's okay to not be happy at your 9 to 5 job. It's okay to not love what you're doing at work, even though that's what you always expected that you would be doing, or what you thought you were going to do based on your degree. That it led you to therapy, which was a great thing. It led you to Milwaukee. It led you to, going off on your own and figuring out like something that really does make you happy and inspires you, and it led you to a podcast, which is a great resource, not just for yourself, but like for the people listening. So no, I'm really glad that it all worked out the way that it did, because it's just that's your story, and like that's just what it is. So Emily, how about you? Why mental health? Why did you decide to become a therapist? Did you always know you wanted to be a therapist? Like, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't always know I wanted to be a therapist. I knew I always wanted to be in the helping professions. I actually I started U of I as an education major, elementary education, and they don't let you switch your major until a year in, which is really annoying because I had to take education classes knowing I did a student internship my senior year of high school, and I realized teaching is not for me. Like, shout out to all the teachers out there because I just couldn't do it. And so I was lucky to have that experience to know that I didn't want to do teaching before I started college, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just I was a communications major. That's what I switched to because I was like, that's broad, right? Like that'll maybe I'll help figure out what I want to do. And I added psychology as a major after taking abnormal psychology because I was so fascinated by the things I was learning in that class. So I decided to add a second major of psychology. And so I was always interested in psychology, but I actually had no idea. Like when senior year rolled around, I started applying to grad schools just to kind of, figure it out. But I was also applying to jobs, and I actually got a job in corporate America that ended up turning down because my mental health was also in the tank because of a toxic relationship I had in college. So my parents had moved to Arizona 2 years prior to me graduating. So I was like, I'm just gonna go there and I'll figure it out once I get there. And I took a gap year and I nannied. And about like halfway through my gap year, I was like, you know what, like I love psychology. I'm so fascinated by human behavior. And I grew up like I just feel like we all grew up in a world that where like mental health wasn't talked about, and like we didn't talk about it in my family, and my family has hella mental health problems. So it was just like,
We
okay,
all
I
do.
want to right. I want to go back to school and learn more about how to help people. And I actually when you're in a therapy grad program, they basically like you can't force it obviously, but they're basically like you need to go get your own therapy. And I had never been to therapy before, like ever in my life. And so, which is kind of crazy because most people are like, you started therapy school or grad school without ever going to therapy. But I was like, yeah, I don't know. I suppressed my trauma for 12 years. Like I had childhood trauma. And so that's probably like why I didn't want to go to therapy because I didn't want to have to talk about what happened to
Oh,
me as
I
a
feel
kid.
you on that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and so but then, like, once I was in grad school, like, mental health school I don't know why I can't, like, think of the right way to think it, but the grad school for mental health, like, it turns your world upside down because not only are they asking you to, like, learn about all these different types of mental health concerns, but they're also asking you to, like, unpeel the layers of yourself because that is like, my job is me, right? Like, and I feel like most people's jobs are, right? But, like, I really not only do I have to, like, know, like, the theories, right, of psychotherapy, but I also have to know how to, like, relate to people and how to use myself as a tool for change, right, for people. And so I went to therapy, and my therapist was like, after, like, 2 weeks, she was like, "You have PTSD and an eating disorder." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I didn't know." And I was like, "I'm a therapist and I didn't know," or I was a therapist in training and I didn't know that I had these things. But then, like a couple months in, she was like, "I think you need a higher level of care because my PTSD symptoms and my eating disorder were really bad." And this is all while I was in school. I was in a new relationship with my now fiance. And so going to treatment like saved my life. I was in treatment for about like 9 months, and it definitely saved my life because there's so much going on at that year in my life. And then obviously at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020 is when COVID hit. So there's just like a lot happening. And I'm so thankful that I went to therapy, and I'm so thankful that I am a therapist, that I get to like be in the presence of helping people heal and helping change. And yeah, so I didn't always know I wanted to do that, but I literally couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important what you said too. Not just that you discovered those things about yourself while you were studying to be a therapist, which in and of itself is really cool and I want to talk about. But I think also that how you approach therapy, what you said, I have to be myself the tool for change. I have to be able to relate to people. And I think that is not every therapist has that approach. And I think that is why mental health and therapy has such a negative connotation, because it's like you just go into a room and someone's writing notes and you're talking and it's like it's not personal. And I really struggled with that the first 9-10 years of going to therapy, because it was like I'm just a case study, and like this isn't, I would lie and say that I was okay so I would get to stop going. This isn't helping anybody. Like I don't want to tell you my problems because you're not even talking to me like a person.
Yeah.
But when I found a therapist in law school who was closer to my age and a lot more warm and friendly and fun, like as fun as therapy can be, but like, like she related to me. She used her own examples to work with me. I was like, oh, okay, like this isn't so bad. Like, why was I so afraid of this all along? Like,
Yeah.
this is super helpful. Like, I'm learning a lot about myself. I'm growing, and I'm really thankful that I stuck to therapy, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And therapy saved my life as well. Like, I would literally not be here had I not gone to therapy, and I would not have gone to therapy had I gone to law school. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's really important to note that not every therapist is the right fit for you because of their approach, and like it's a personal thing for them as well, like how they want to approach it as a therapist. So I think it takes time to find the right fit, but I'm glad you
Definitely does.
talked about that.
I think that's a really good point, that sometimes you do have to shop around to find a therapist that fits. And there's nothing wrong with that, because not every therapist is going to be your cup of tea. And I think like finding a therapist that fits your style, because I joke, like I'm not a traditional therapist. Like obviously, like I follow the ethics and the laws and all that good stuff. But the best advice I ever got in grad school from my favorite professor was like, do not like wear a therapist hat. Like wear just your own like Emily hat, because that's going to be the best, that's going to be how you're going to be the best therapist that you can be, if you're being, in my opinion, if you're being yourself and not robotic and not um it's just like taking notes behind a computer screen or on a notepad. And actually my friend who's a therapist and I were talking about this yesterday. I think there's a new wave of therapists that are coming, and they're a lot less robotic and a lot more like humanistic, and they focus more on just being themselves. And I mean, I personally love that, and I think, I mean, my clients keep coming back so I think they like that too. But yeah, I think it's just like how mental health is changing. I think also like the kind of like the rules, like the unspoken rules for being a therapist are also changing. And I love that, because I have a therapist who, I mean, he dresses so casually, he eats Pop Tarts during our sessions, like, and he's the greatest. Like uh, he's who I aspire to be. And so I love it.
I love that advice. Be Emily, don't just be a therapist when you're
Hmm.
therapy. I think that's such a great advice. I love that you said that for anyone who is pursuing being a mental health counselor, a therapist. Same with law. There is a new wave of legal professionals entering the workforce and the legal profession. And my generation, especially, we are the generation that COVID hit, we were one else, our first year of law school. So our entire law school experience has been affected by COVID and the shift and the wave of mental health focus and all of that. So I think as my generation of law students enters the workforce, between my class and like the two classes above me and the two classes below me, I think that like section of us, like I think the legal profession is shifting as well. So I think it's a good time to, like we were talking about this in your podcast, it's a good time to be entering corporate America or just any profession in general, because mental health is being more focused on and more talked about. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's really important for me as a lawyer too. Like I need to show up as myself, as Kayla, because that's who's going to get the job done, and that's who people want to work with. That's who's going to help provide the services that I'm providing, not doing them as a lawyer or as an influencer. Like, they like with influencing, like I was like, what content do I create? How do I grow? How do I do this? And it's like, I share my life online. How what you see is what you get. Like that is who I am. 100% online is who I am offline. Of course, I don't show everything for safety reasons, but like what I'm showing you online, I don't sugarcoat that at all. And I'm showing up as me, authentically myself. And that's what my audience is gravitating towards. Your clients go to you because you're Emily. People want to take your classes, actually, because it's who you are when you're teaching. Like, so I think that's a great point that everyone can kind of take for themselves. Can you talk a little bit about the process, Emily, of applying to grad school for mental health? Because I've talked about the law school application process. We've talked about the med school process on this podcast as well. I'm curious, especially as someone who did it non-traditional in the sense that you took a gap year and went back to school, and then actually talk a little bit about going back to school for applied psychology as well.
Definitely, yeah. So it is kind of like the non-traditional to take a gap year, and I had a lot of like we've talked about this on our podcast, but I had a lot of self-esteem issues by doing that. I moved back in with my parents. I was nannying. Like I didn't think that was quote unquote good enough right at the time, and so I had taken the GRE my senior year of college because I had kind of wanted to go to grad school. So like thankfully I didn't have to like study for that again. Just started applying to schools. But like the questions are probably the same for like most programs, like why do you want to do this, right? And I mentioned this on I think the first episode of the podcast, I'm not sure of our podcast, but I just wrote the cheesy like I just want to help people line, right? And while that's not untrue, it's like the reason I'm a therapist is so much greater than just trying to help people, right? Like I really want to make a change on how people approach their mental health and change how we view mental health in general. But yeah, applying to schools was like challenging because you're literally writing 3 essays for each school, like a diversity statement, why you want to do this. And I can't remember the third one, but I know there were 3 essays for most schools. And it was again like I just want to help people. I just want to help people. And like I really feel a lot of people probably gave that answer because like you had said like on our podcast about how your why what you want to do with your law degree has shifted. I really feel like that's the same case for like when you're applying to like, any kind of higher education after college is like well, I don't really know. I know I'm interested in this. I want to do this, right? I want to get this degree, but why I want to do this has shifted. And so I always like joke about like, yeah, I applied to grad school on that. I just want to help people, but that's definitely changed.
Yeah. So before Ashley goes, I want to say something about that. So I actually talked about this on my podcast and I have a whole blog post on it. And it's something I want to help more people with like admission to law school and like that kind of stuff and just grad school in general, like as a consultant again. Um, I my why didn't shift. It's how I'm going to do it and like my career path it has shifted, but I think the why has always been that I want to inspire people and I want to help people. Similar to you, but how I go about that is different. I started off, wanting to be a lawyer for a lifestyle company, in-house, even real estate, and now I get to help. My goal is to help influencers make social media business and make sure they're legally protected. But it's because I want to help people and I want to inspire people to achieve their goals and achieve their dreams. But the why is still the same. And it's the same why I started a podcast is because I want to help people and inspire people. And
Yeah.
again, that common thread that I was talking about earlier, like it's all connected. And I think I talk about this a lot. Like we had to write a personal statement and a diversity statement as well for law school. And in people, they're all, yeah, it's like, why do you want to be a lawyer? Why do you want to study this? And it's like, don't just give a cant. I want to be a lawyer because I want to defend people that have been, served injustice by the criminal justice system. Okay, that's great, but like, how are you going to do that? How is being a lawyer going to allow you to do that? What are you going to get out of law school? What is law school going to give you? What are you
Yeah.
law school? Like, there's a lot more you need to like uncover there, and that's what's going to make you stand out because everyone's saying the same thing, but how are you saying it differently? That is like, we want this person here. This person's going to add value to this program because they're building a class based off of how well they think you're going to work together as well.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought that up. I think, yes, be honest, you want to help people, but like, how are you going to use your degree to help people? How are you going to do it? What are you going to get out of going through this program? Not just financially or career wise, but like as a person. And I think when you make that your own and it's a unique story, I think that's what is like, oh, like we want this person here, especially if your grades or your GRE or your LSAT or MCAT or whatever school exam you take, if your grades and your GPA aren't there, your letters of recommendation and your essays is what's going to get you in, and you want to make like the best example for yourself from day one, because that's the first impression that they get, and first impressions are important. You can change them, but they are important. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. Ashley, can you talk a little bit about going back to school a few years out and for applied psychology and what that process has been like?
So it's kind of been a long, winding road for myself. I always thought so. I graduated from undergrad in May 2017. And I always thought, like, I'm going to go back to school and get my MBA one day because I just figured I'm going to stay in business. And that's like the typical thing you do, especially if you work at a big company. Like, if you want that pay bump 5 to 10 years out of college, you go get your MBA. And I was always researching programs and I was like, I really don't want to do this because it's obviously very numbers based, like with business type classes. And I've always been really terrible at math and just like none of the classes ever really sounded that appealing to me. So once I probably about a year ago at this point, I started realizing I was so interested in psychology and human behavior. And this is way before we ever started talking about the podcast and also before I started becoming a fitness instructor. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to school to be a therapist because I didn't know if I could emotionally handle that. I feel like it's a very emotionally exhaustive job, like hearing about other people's problems and issues. And I was like, I don't know if I myself could handle doing that full time. And also, obviously, going back to school is such a huge undertaking, not just time, but also money. And if you have to take tests like the GRE to get in. So just started looking at online programs and I was like, okay, I'm interested in psychology. I took a psychology class in college, but I was like hungover every time I went. I wasn't super interested in it at the time. It was just like a gen ed. So I applied at the University of Wisconsin Madison because I got in-state tuition living here and I just took an online class. Basically, I was accepted as it's called something like adult continuing education. I just took the basic psychology, like 3 credit hour class over the summer last summer. And I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could just apply to a school and basically like send your transcripts and prove that you live in state and just, like, take one-off classes. Like, I could have taken any class that the university offered. I had no idea
I'm gonna look
that you could
into
do that
that.
without being in a program.
I
Yeah,
definitely
it was
go back to
really
school
interesting.
time ever, but like there's some classes that like, especially in law school, I mean, I'm sure it's different, but like some schools are starting to get, fashion law and sports law and entertainment law. I took entertainment law, but like influencer marketing law, like undergrad classes are for fashion merchandising. And like, I love to learn. So like, I wish I could, I would, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
But
you definitely can because it's like a low commitment way where you don't have to commit to a program. I mean, obviously there's a cost associated with it, but it's a lot cheaper to take one class and figure out that's not what you want to do with your life and you're not locked in. Like you could take the one
and
class and be done if you want to.
the grade you get isn't matter anymore. You're not graduating, like
Right.
it's just for fun.
Exactly. So after I took that class, I figured out, okay, like this is definitely something I'm interested in, but there's not really a lot of mental health type jobs that I could find that aren't, being a licensed therapist or counselor or going to med school or something to like be a psychologist. So I'm like constantly looking up. I thought for a while maybe I wanted to be a master's in public health because I wanted to do something with like mental health awareness with public health because I wanted to do something to promote, knowledge about therapy and different mental health conditions. But there's very, very few programs out there that offer that. And a lot of them you have to have a little bit of work experience working in mental health, which I didn't have. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just not gonna find something to do. And then just, like, kept searching, and then I found through the University of Pennsylvania, they had I think I saw, like, a video about applied positive psychology that they had on YouTube or something, and then I looked up the school of psychology at that college, and I was like, "Oh, they have a certificate program that you could do online, kind of at your own pace." I'm like, "This is amazing." Like, I'm just there was, like, low barrier to entry. All I had to do was get my transcripts from U of I and send them over, and it was, like, $10 or something, and I got accepted, and I was like, "This is perfect because now I'm doing the podcast. It's something that I can knowledge that I can tangibly use in the podcast to actually help people, and it's also not the huge commitment for myself like going to a full-time grad school program is, but it's still like at a great university. It's something that's really, really interesting to me. And then, I mean, who knows where that'll lead to after I take a couple classes because I've just kind of scrapped like the 5-year plan. Whenever anybody asks me my 5-year plan, I'm like, I have no idea. Like, we'll just see when we get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to scrap it. If the last couple years taught us anything, we really just never know what's gonna happen. And the whole like one of the biggest themes on my podcast is nonlinear paths, which is both of all of us have nonlinear paths. Like we all just kind of went with it and here and there took pieces of each experience and made what we're doing now. And that could change tomorrow because something could happen.
Mhm.
We just don't know. But I think it's really great that you went back to school and you followed your passion and you don't know where it will lead, but you're getting so much out of it that can take you in so many different directions. And going back to earlier, like you said, you were so miserable, you were crying every day going to work. Like that version you would not have expected where you are today, but it led you to where you are today. So you never really know what could happen tomorrow. And one thing you brought up, you didn't think you had the emotional wherewithal to really be a therapist yourself. So can you talk a little bit about that, Emily? Like that aspect of being a therapist and a counselor, managing your own emotions and your experiences when you are helping someone as a therapist, especially because you said if you go to therapy yourself and you wouldn't be able to be a therapist if you didn't go to therapy yourself. How do you navigate and manage your own emotions and emotional responses to what you're talking about with your client?
Yeah. So definitely therapy, and also what the two of you were talking about living with uncertainty and not having a plan is something I like. Probably like the number one thing I try to help my clients navigate, right, is living with uncertainty, especially like in the pandemic world that we are in and just everything else. But a lot. I think there's like a misconception around what therapists do, and not like you guys have it, but just in general, because people are always like, how do you just sit there and listen to people's problems all day long, right? And like for me, sure, that's hard. Like some of the stories that I hear are absolutely heartbreaking. And also like knowing that you're not just listening to people's problems, like I'm helping them change what's happening in their life, right? And helping them make better choices for themselves or helping them decide like what they want to do with their lives, right? Or helping them heal from their trauma. Like it's not just listening, and yes, listening is a really important part of my job, but I think for me, knowing that I'm helping them make their lives I'm helping them live the lives that they want to live, right, and like heal from their past trauma, and not just listening but being an active agent of change in somebody's life. That's what fills up my cup, and that's why I do what I do. And of course, like just listening and giving empathy, right? Like we live in a world that like doesn't give empathy ever, right? And so to be able to give somebody empathy and give somebody a space, like because people are also like the world's burning, how do you like what's the point of your job when everything is just going to be shit tomorrow anyways, right? And it's like sure, like the world's always going to be on fire, but like being able to provide like a space for somebody to just come and just be unapologetically themselves and just cry if they need to cry or do whatever they need to scream, right? Be angry, whatever they need to do. Like that fills my cup, right? And sure, it's hard and it's emotionally draining, and therapy and like taking care of myself is, I have to do that. Otherwise I couldn't do this job because therapist burnout rate is so high. But so I need to make sure that I'm not burning out. But yeah, like what I was saying, just being able to be an agent of change for somebody is really important to me. And it's how I get past hearing all the hard stuff. And yeah.
No, I love that. And I'm glad you brought up like the world being on fire, because the world is always going to be on fire, but like we cannot live with that mentality of like the world's
Right.
going to go to shit, so like we're just going to go to shit with it. No, like if the world goes to shit tomorrow, you want to be able to like die knowing you did your best and like you tried and you died doing what you loved and you were happy and fulfilled. So like not to get like super morbid, but it's true, like we have to just, you know, keep doing the things that are going to make us happy and fulfilled. And when it's our time to go, it's our time to go. But like the world isn't going to stop burning, but we can't burn with it. Like
No.
we have to keep focusing on ourselves, because we still like until it's our time, we're still here. So like if you're living with that mentality, then you're just never going to be happy. And a lot of too many people live their lives that way. And it's just I learned that very early on in law school. Like I refuse to live my life the way that other people around me are living it just for the sake of it, whether that's that mentality or law school or being a lawyer or whatever. So I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I'm glad you brought that up too. And you mentioned the high burnout rate for your profession, which is similar to my profession. How do you navigate burnout? Like some tangible tips for people, but also like you yourself, both of you. How do you guys, you know, take care of yourselves, prioritize you as people, you know, self-care practices, tools in your toolbox, and Emily, like tips that you give your clients to navigate when they are, their anxiety or their depression or their mental health is just they're at their breaking point. What are some self-care tools that you recommend?
So something that I think is really important is that once you get to like a because burnout's now a medical condition, being recognized as a medical condition, which I think is sad, but also great that we're recognizing it as a serious medical and mental health issue. But you don't want to get to that point, right? Which is why like people can't do self-care when they're already on fire. It's not going to work. Like self-care has to be something that you incorporate into your life every single day. Like I call it maintenance. You have to have the maintenance self care because that's going to be preventable to getting to the level of burnout that is where you have to like remove you have to quit your job, right? Or you have to like get a divorce, whatever is happening in your life, because you have to remove the thing that's causing you to be burnt out if you get to that level, which is why if you don't want to get to that level, right? If you don't want to quit your job or end your relationship or whatever it is, you have to be taking care of yourself every single day and like making time for it. Like people tell me like I don't have time for it. I'm like, we got to find the time, right? Like let's work together to find the
You have to
time.
make it.
Yeah.
It's not gonna magically appear. Like you have to make time.
Yeah. And you have to do the things that fill up your cup. Like Ashley and I were talking in our podcast last week, like hanging out with our friends is something that fills up our cup. And also having a morning routine and a night routine. I'm not trying to be that girl on TikTok, but like I really can't.
I think that we have to explain that, because that
I
is
know.
what we think of now. But like there is such a thing as having a routine that isn't like you live and die by this. Like if it doesn't happen, like you failed. Like that doesn't mean you weren't
Totally.
productive. Like making your bed today, that's you did a great job.
Absolutely. That's the number one thing I say. Like, did you do something tiny? Celebrate it, right? Like, celebrate making your bed,
Always.
like whatever it is, because those things matter. And I don't think we give enough emphasis on those little things. So that's something else I encourage people to do to take care of themselves is like those small things matter. Like, your routine doesn't have to be like waking up, running 7 miles, drinking a green smoothie, doing yoga for 20 minutes, right? Like, it can be like whatever works for you, but have one. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. Have a morning, have a nighttime routine. You don't have to do it every day. You're allowed to be flexible with it, but have one because that is what allows me to get up every day and do my job is by taking care of myself a couple hours in the morning before work and then a couple hours in the evening. And that kind of like differs day to day, of course, depending on like if it's a weekend or a weeknight, right? But having some structure, I think, is really important in taking care of ourselves.
Yeah. So what are some things you do in each one that like people could implement, take what you want, leave what you
Yeah.
don't. What are some tools that you do in your morning and nighttime routines and on the weekends as well?
Yeah, I love just disclaimer of take what you take what you want, leave what you don't because it's not going to work for everyone. But I go to Orange Theory a couple times a week in the morning, like before work. I never thought I'd be a morning person or especially a morning workout person. But when I first started my job, I would sleep in till like literally 8:50 if I had a 9 o'clock session because it was on telehealth because I started this job during the pandemic. Um, and that just like wasn't working for me. So I knew that I had to get up an extra hour or two before work in order to give myself that time. Like I come home from the gym and if I'm working from home, I just like chill, right? Like I just it sounds like silly, but I just like sit on my couch and have my breakfast,
I
drink my
do the
coffee.
exact same thing just before I have anything to do.
Yeah, I needed that, right? Like I needed that time because rolling out of bed at 8:50 for my 9 a.m. session, then working till whenever I work till just wasn't working for me. So I had to get up, go to the gym, have my breakfast, like spend a little bit of time with my fiance. So that's kind of like what my morning looks like. Again, I don't work out every day. Like I give myself the rest if I need to, but definitely during the week, like I need to get up a little bit early before work in order to give myself me time. And then at night, like I always after I get off, if I'm working from home or if I'm coming home from the office, I tell my fiance like, "You can't talk to me for like 30 minutes because I need some compression time and like I can't have the TV on. Like I need like no stimulus, right? Because I've been stimulated all day and so like we'll start making dinner but we'll kind of be doing it in silence and then once we're sitting down as dinner I'm like, okay, how was your day, like let's talk now. And like I know it probably sounds really weird
No, I
but
love
I
I'm
need it. Like I can't have the TV on. I can't be talking to anyone. I just need 30 minutes of like decompressing time. And then I can be like, okay, how was your day? Like, tell me what's going on for you. And then I'm huge on sleep. Like, we underestimate how powerful sleep is. So I try to get like, I'm in bed by 9, like almost every night. Like, I try to get my 8 hours every night because, again, like sleep is the one time where you can turn off your brain like completely, right? You can recharge your batteries. And so sleepy time tea, I'm also Ashley, we should try to get them as a sponsor because I drink 2 cups every night to try to get me to sleep better, which has really helped me. And then on the weekends, hanging out with my friends. Like I'm an extrovert, so like spending time with the people that I love fills up my cup. And yeah, so those are some tips and things that I do. Again, won't work for everyone, but I found like I have to do those things in order to recharge and be the best I can at my job.
Yeah, and in your own personal life, for your fiance, for your family and friends,
Yeah.
I agree. I love that. And and also I think you were like the silencing, like I think it might be weird, but no, I think it also allows you not only to decompress, but if you or your partner or whoever your kid came home from school that day and like they're really agitated, like having that like so-called rule, like or like that time where like take 30 minutes to yourself and we'll talk about it in at dinner at the table, and like knowing that we're not going to talk until we're at the dinner table, like it allows them to calm down, and that way like there's no fighting or there shouldn't be any fighting or screaming or yelling because it's like you've already processed it or begun to process whatever it is, and you can sit down and have a more civil conversation. So I think
Yes.
I love that. I love that tip. And yeah, I'm always being stimulated, listening to podcasts, listening to music, TV, reading books, social media, like cool. I want to come home and sit in silence and do absolutely nothing for a little while before I have to do something again. So I agree. And I think also with like the morning routine and the weekends, like I'm an extrovert as well. I think I'm an extroverted introvert, but I am very extroverted. We were talking about this off air. Like I need to be around people, options, things to do, culture, lifestyle. Like I like having things to do. Like that's what I fills my cup up on the weekends, like going out on the town and like having a good time. But also like I'm gonna be on the couch that day reading a book or watching TV. Like promise you, you're not getting me up off the couch. Like, I have my moments, but I agree. And also I like to do Melissa Wood Health. I'm not like a gym person. I'm not a cardio person, but you can do however you move your body, just
Yeah.
moving your body in general. And I think some people prefer nighttime or like getting it in the middle of the day between meetings. If you're sitting all day, like that's good for you, like go, by all means go do that. But I agree, I think I don't do it every morning, but when I do it in the morning, I feel so much better. And it could just be as simple as a 10-minute Pilates, yoga, YouTube
Yeah.
workout. It doesn't have to be Orange Theory, it doesn't have to be
No.
a class or anything. So I think those are some really great ones. Ashley, what are your ways, your tools self-care, and especially as someone who is a fitness instructor and like that is what you
Mhm.
do your day job, like how do you find time to do those things that feel good for you, and how do you fill up your cup?
I would say my one biggest thing is therapy. It almost feels like a superpower to me because when things are stressing me out, I know that I can kind of like put it on the shelf and be like, okay, I can take it down on Tuesday at 2 p.m. I'm talking to my therapist. I will be able to work through this. I don't have to constantly worry about it for the next week because I know that I'll have that time to actually process it. And then also in the fitness industry, like overworking is such a big thing physically with us as well, because if you're teaching classes or training clients, you're doing those workouts with them. And then also, like, I have my own fitness goals. So I'm teaching 4 times a week, and then I'm also lifting 3 times with a trainer. So basically, like 7 days a week, I'm at the gym, and that's something I have struggled with and really had to scale back from because I'm like, I have to be at the gym and I have to be so on and happy and like have this different, just have like a little bit more energy during my classes. So if I need to take a day off or not go to the gym, I'll just be like, "Okay, I'm just gonna go for a walk today. I'm just gonna stay at home." And I have to be okay with that. And it's been hard for me not to be hard on myself because when you are working in fitness, like your body is your profession in your business and like how you look, unfortunately, like does play a little bit. That's something I've struggled with, like, "Oh, do I not look like a fitness instructor, or are people gonna come to my classes because they think that I look in shape or fit?" So, I've had to kind of be careful and work with my therapist about making sure that I'm not over exercising and not overdoing it, and something that I've talked with other fitness professionals about as well, just like kind of how to balance that. Like, if I just need to go for a walk and get a coffee today, like that's fine. If I miss a workout, it's okay because I still have to teach tomorrow. So I'm going to get some movement in. And also, working with a dietitian has been like so life changing for me. I've only been doing it for a little bit, but making sure that I get my food, in line and making sure that I'm getting enough calories every day and like a balanced diet has helped not just my physical health, but my mental health too, because I didn't realize that I was under eating and it wasn't intentionally, but for how much activity I do, I feel like that's something that was really important for me to make sure that I wasn't, like, skipping on meals or missing, entire food groups like I was. And then also just having boundaries in general has been so game changing for me. Like, if like, I have a work party tonight, for example, and I told them straight up before my friends I'm going with, I'm like, "I'm not gonna drink. Like, I'll DD you guys. It doesn't matter, but I wanna come home and chill and watch a movie or whatever and read and feel totally good tomorrow morning." So having those boundaries to say like, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave at 7 p.m. and you're not gonna see me again. So if you wanna talk to me, like, come hang out with me before then, like, that's when the bus is leaving, I'm gone." Just having those boundaries to be able to say, like, "I'm gonna make sure," like Emily said, "that you get your 8 hours plus of sleep and I can kind of have that me time to do the things I enjoy while still working on my obligations," has been totally revolutionary because when I would have to do things, have events before, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm dreading this because I'm going to be there for 6 hours," or even like going to the bars. Like, oh, I would be counting down the hours until I could go home because I would just be so tired. I'm like, no one's going to want to leave till 2 a.m., but I wanna leave at 9 because I get super, super tired. And now just being able to tell my friends, like, "Yeah, I'll come out for a couple drinks and then I'm gonna go home, like, I'll Uber, I'll take care of myself, see you guys later," has just been totally game changing. So, being able to work on those boundaries in therapy has been, like, the biggest self-care tip that I could recommend to anyone.
No, that's such a good one. I'm all about boundary setting as well, not settling. I talked about that earlier. And yeah, it's hard to set boundaries because and it's hard to stick to them because people aren't going to respect them. But I think it's really important that you do because you know what's best for you. You're the only one at the end of the day. You are the only, you are with yourself till the end, no one else. I know we're running out of time, and I wish we could talk more about what you said, you know, working with the dietitian under eating for your activity levels. I struggled with that for sure. Disordered eating. Emily, you struggled with an eating disorder and navigating that. Maybe we'll do a part 2, talk more about that aspect of it in the future, because I would really love to talk about that. I had a body image expert on. We talk a little bit about those two things, eating disorders and disordered eating, and the difference and why that happens and all of that. So for anyone listening, that's a good episode to check out as well. But I loved having this conversation. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Can you plug your podcast really fast and, you know, plug yourselves? Where can everyone find you guys?
So our podcast is the Because We Went to Therapy podcast, and our Instagram handle is the same, Because We Went to Therapy, same as our website, Because We Went to Therapy. But yeah, definitely
keeping it simple over here.
Yeah.
And I'll link everything in the show notes.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Kayla.